Hello friends! For today's video, I wanted to go through a list of some books that I think are very creepy and very fitting for the fall season if you are somebody who likes the spookier stories. I did do a whole video of fall book recommendations and cozy book recommendations, and I did a separate video over on my side channel for anime, manga, video games, shows that also fit the fall theme. But for today, we're zeroing in on the creepy. If you want to see those other videos though, I'll have them linked. Before jumping into it, a big thank you to Book of the Month for working with me on today's video. I have been a Book of the Month subscriber for a long time, so I'm always really grateful when they want to work with me. And I especially thought it was fitting to mention them in today's video because one of the books that I'm going to be talking about by Erin A. Craig called House of Salt and Sorrows, I actually got from Book of the Month. That was one of my first creepy fantasy books that I ever picked up. But as a lot of you probably know, Book of the Month has a wide range of genres that you can select from. Each month there are at least 5 different books or more that you can choose from, and they do come from other genres. So when I want to dip my toes in a thriller, or when I want to dip my toes into something else that's scary that isn't just fantasy, Book of the Month definitely has those things available. Of course, they have other things as well. Some of my favorite cozy reads have come from Book of the Month. They also have nonfiction books, they have historical fiction books, they have all sorts of different kinds of books, and they're quite affordable. A lot of times I try to get new books from the library or from local bookstores because it can be really expensive to get new books. So part of what I like about Book of the Month is the fact that they're more affordable. You get a brand new hardcover every single month for a lot less than you would if you were to buy it elsewhere. They have a mix of debut authors, so they're getting the name out there for authors that might have been lesser known while still having really popular works as well, and then everything in between. Given that it's spooky season now, one of the books that I selected would be The Stranger Upstairs, which is a thriller. Misleading omens and untrustworthy figures abound in this chilling tale about a couple who move into a murder house. And then a little bit sweeter, the other one I picked would be a romance called You Again. Let your faith in love be renewed by a commitment phobe and hopeless romantic who go from enemies to friends to lovers. One additional thing that's really exciting is that Book of the Month has officially launched their audiobook service as well. So each month, if you would rather use your credit on an audiobook rather than a physical book, you can do that. You can easily find their new audiobooks under their selections for the month, but also when you have credits accumulated, you can go ahead and go to all audiobooks, and then you can download any of the audiobooks that they have available there with the credits that you've built up. I'm a huge fan of both physical reading as well as audiobooks, so I love this addition to their service. If you're interested in checking Book of the Month out, you can get your first book for $9.99 using the code CIDER. A big thank you again to Book of the Month for working with me, for continuing to work with me. I really do love their service, and so if you're interested in checking them out, I'll have them linked down below. But now on to our creepy book recommendations. Jumping into it, the first one on the list would be Small Favors. This is still to this day one of my favorite horror fantasy stories. You follow this young woman who lives in a very rural area, and basically creepy things start happening. And because this area that she lives in, the population is so incredibly small, there's a lot of gossip, and so it's hard to discern what's just people making something out to be much bigger than it actually is, and what's actually truthful and real. And you see just little creepy thing after little creepy thing occurring, and I could not get enough of it. It's kind of a slower going story, but I enjoyed the ride. I enjoyed trying to figure out what was going on. And for me, with a lot of creepy stories, I don't care that much what the explanation is. If we get an explanation, what happens at the end, I just want to be creeped out throughout the story. And I think Small Favors does that very well. And there's also more of a folklore element to the creepiness. After that, we have Belladonna. This one follows a young woman who ends up visiting some people in this very large house, and it would seem like maybe something is going on, something sinister. She's trying to figure out if she can trust this family, who she can trust with this family, if anyone, and why it seems she doesn't have the ability to die. And she's able to force herself to essentially die so that she can tap into certain things. And that creates for some, of course, creepy vibes already. But just in general, there was some of the atmosphere that's built throughout the story and some of the descriptions that the author has that really actually, I was a little disturbed. I think this author writes fantastic descriptions anyway. Her other series is not horror leaning basically at all. And I remember thinking the descriptions were fantastic. It was one of my favorite parts about her duology. So when I picked this up, I wasn't expecting for that same compliment to apply here, but it absolutely did. The atmosphere was amazing. So scary, so creepy, and there's kind of a weird, dark, almost Phantom of the Opera feeling to this story. Not in the way of there being any kind of music association, but just... you'll see if you pick it up. And also, if you like the idea of death personified, then this one is definitely worth picking up. After that, we have What Moves the Dead. This is a gothic horror story. It's a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher. And you're looking at somebody visiting some people where, just like with a lot of these, some strange things start occurring. And it would seem a certain person is kind of close to the end of their life, but they're hanging on. And if you know the original story, which I wasn't familiar with it before I picked this up, but I am now, then you can kind of probably guess what is causing this. But even if you know, the way that T. Kingfisher describes everything, the way that the imagery that she presents to you is just so disturbing, where you're like, oh no, and there's a part where like a certain character is kind of screaming, but they're not actually making any sounds, and just, it's one of those things where you're like, oh no. That's how, I don't know, I'm such a wimp, and so I was creeped out by a number of those parts. But I actually think if you're a wimp like me, this one's not actually, and I would say for Belladonna too, these are very, very, very doable. There's so much more to the plot than just the creepiness. So I think if you want the creepy vibes, but you don't necessarily want to be terrified where you can't go to sleep, these two are probably pretty good ones. After that, we have The Salt Grows Heavy. This one has a heavy dose of body horror. And body horror doesn't scare me, it just makes me uncomfortable. Like, there were a number of times, I'm just remembering one of the things specifically that the main, I guess you could say, character, which if you read it, you'll know why I'm wording it like that. But, just like something they eat. I was like, no, gross. But the idea is you follow this mermaid and a witch doctor as they are traveling through this one area, and they come across what would seem to be like a cult that is taking advantage of some children. And they do some strange experiments, and the mermaid and the witch doctor somewhat try to intervene, but they're not necessarily good themselves. And the mermaid especially is not like a person, but the story does have a lot of commentary on fairy tales in general and how we perceive fairy tales. So I think that there's interesting commentary, plus the writing is really beautiful. It's very, 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 very dense, just to give you that heads up. And it's also novella, so if you're somebody who prefers shorter, creepier things, then this one's got that shorter page length. After that, we have House of Salt and Sorrows, which is also by the author of Small Favors. This one is going to be a little bit tropier. I think you'll probably have a lot more fun with it, but it's a little bit of a... It definitely has twists and turns, and it's kind of like it's warping your sense of reality. There's a part where you get a big reveal, and then you're like, oh, okay, so like now I know. But then it definitely makes you question, where you're like, wait, do I know? And that's what it's like for the character too. So it definitely transports you to that character, that area, and just trying to be there, experiencing everything with them. If you don't know, this is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, except for Scary, where a number of the women in this family are dying, and it seems like the family is cursed, and they're always in mourning, and then it would seem maybe they are cursed, or maybe they're not, and maybe things just happen to them, and so you're exploring that. After that, we have Ninth House. Ninth House is one that personally didn't really work for me, but if you like dark academia that is extremely dark, if you like looking at ghosts in your stories, and ghosts that are very disturbing and they're not friendly at all, this one is going to fit the bill. It's one of the only ones on this list that I think truly has some of the most disturbing content in it. So it's not just that it's creepy, because there is something fun about being creeped out and scared. This one is a lot more serious, and there's a lot of commentary in there. So I just want to make that clear, because I don't want somebody going into this one and then running into those things and truly being disturbed. So maybe look into this one a little bit before you pick it up. But if you like dark academia, if you like the idea of the wealthy and the rich and the people in these prestigious schools being truly awful human beings and exploring what that would be like, then Ninth House is going to be perfect for you. The last one I'll mention would be House of Hollow. This one takes place in our own world, and you're following these sisters, and it would seem that there is a person that is following them, and for some reason seems to be very involved and invested in them. You find out that when the sisters were young, they disappeared. They were kidnapped, you think, and then one day they reappeared and they were covered in blood, but they didn't seem to have any injuries. And they'd never really been the same since, but the world has been obsessed with them ever since that event took place. And so initially the person that's following them you think is just maybe some odd stalker, but then the stalking gets much more intense, and then it would seem that there's some magical things at play as well, and so you're just trying to discern what on earth is going on. That's it though for some creepy book recommendations. Like I said, I did a whole bunch of other fall themed videos, so if the creepy stuff, if you're less inclined to pick those up, but you do still want cozy books or just other things associated with the fall season, then I'll have those linked. I would love to know, because I myself, like I was saying before, am quite a pansy when it comes to creepy stories, but I do like that feeling of like, but not to the point where I can't sleep and I'm having nightmares or anything like that. I just like a small dose of scary. So if you have recommendations that are like that, please let me know. But then also, if you have, for those people that do like the really, really, really disturbing and scary and creepy, if you have some recommendations for that, feel free to say those as well, but just maybe be specific so that it's easy for people who come to this and are looking for recommendations. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely, lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.